Chapter 19. 9 days later. It is Easter. I am dressed in my painting clothes. I go into the kitchen and pack my food in the cooler. I hear Jeff moving on the sofa bed. You going on a picnic at this hour? Jeff calls to me. I'm off to paint a house. If you feel like working, I could use your help. Could you use $10 an hour? Sounds good to me. But I don't know if I can do any good. What are you talking about? You have full use of your brain and both hands now. I'd really like to. It'll take me a few minutes to get ready. Beatrice is going to work with us. Come with her. I'll meet you there. Awesome. I never thought it'd work again. Or at least for a long time. All right. 2 days later, wearing a dust mask, Jeff sands an area on the north wall that I patched. I watch him. I see how quickly he is regaining his more subtle motor responses. I amble over to him and we talk through our dust masks. Jeff, you are doing great. But may I show you how to sand so you won't make ridges? Sure. The hardness of the patching compound and the wall are usually different. I filled the cracks several times, leaving only the slightest film higher than the surface of the wall. Then I sand lightly in circles. Looks easy enough. Thanks. I'm stopping for lunch. You can have lunch whenever you get hungry. I'm starving now. Me too, Beatrice says. Then let's all do lunch, I say. We clean our hands and saunter to the porch with the cooler. I remove a jar of ground beef, butter and honey. Would you like some? No, I feel like eating some fruit right now, Jeff says. Help yourself, Beatrice says. Thanks. Dad, did you smash your thumb with a hammer? No. It pusses like this every so often, I say as I look down at my thumb. At the side of my nail is an inflamed and blackened area with pus. Where it is blackened, a hole has been eaten through the nail. Is it painful? What is it? Jeff asks. An infection that is very painful at times. When it first happened, it lasted for 7 weeks. Then it disappeared for 3 months. This makes the 7th time it has reoccurred. The blackness and eating away of my fingernail and skin usually indicates molds. After the 4th time it happened, I had a lab test the pus for molds. The results came back positive for penicillin. I hadn't had penicillin in 15 years. Whoa, Jeff says. 15 years and it's still in your body. Beatrice says, if it can eat a hole through my nail, imagine what it has done to the inside of my body. Of course, the air may have rendered it more volatile than it was inside my body. I'll never take antibiotics again. Beatrice says, Dad, how did you get into raw meat? That's a jump in subject. I pause, trying to remember. I recall 13 years ago. I had already stabilized my cancers and mitigated many of my other problems. But I wasn't satisfied. I had had a taste of good health and I wanted more. Everything I read was contradictory. So I decided that I had to enter the world to learn the truths about optimal health. I hadn't realized at that point that it was a matter of difference. Everyone's body is different. Every body reacts to food differently. Because specific foods and amounts are proper for someone, doesn't mean that those foods and amounts would be proper for others, and vice versa. That is no contradiction. Anyway, I traveled North America on my bicycle and lived off the land for almost 3 years. I occasionally lived with Native American tribes for a month at a time. A very wise native suggested that I eat raw meat. I rejected the advice because I was a die-hard evangelistic vegetarian. The experience that changed me was unusual. After 2.5 years traveling on my bicycle, I became discouraged. I had gotten too thin and was weakening more every day. I thought you said you were always overweight. Beatrice asks. I was overweight when I ate cooked foods. I got slender when I switched to all raw but meatless diets. And then, when I bicycled and lived outdoors, the stress was so great that I deteriorated. I regularly ate as much as 3 pounds of nuts daily, 6 avocados, enormous amounts of fruit, and every day I awakened a bit thinner than the previous morning. But I didn't want to return to civilization with its pollution and its survival of the fittest attitude. I had seen in the world that only malnourished animals lived by that rule. Otherwise, life outdoors was peaceful. I loved living outdoors, but, physically, it was too stressful on a raw meatless diet. Rather than go back to civilization, I decided to fast myself to death. First, I dug in and built a 10-foot stone house in what I was told was an ancient Indian burial ground. It was in the foothills of a mountain range 20 miles northwest of Salton Sea, here in California. Because the house was sunken, the roof was only 4.5 feet above the ground. At night, I jumped onto the flat wood roof with my sleeping bag. I loved falling asleep while watching the stars. A coyote woke me one night around midnight. She made sounds like a laughing crazy person. She stood 50 feet away. I could see her because I had night vision. Night vision is something I had developed while living outdoors. After several consecutive nights, I realized she had a purpose in waking me. But what it was I didn't know. Another night I sensed a coyote passing in the wash 20 feet behind me. I turned and saw him. I wondered why the laughing one woke me when they could have easily passed me while I slept. This game went on every night for 2 weeks. Each night I sensed another coyote, without using my eyes or ears. I think that was what they had intended for me, to strengthen my sixth sense. Then I turned in the direction where I felt he or she was, and there was another coyote. Within 2 weeks I had sensed each one as he or she passed through the narrow canyon by me. There were 11 in the pack. One unusually warm night it rained lightly. I slept on the ground inside the house. My sleeping bag was unzipped and I had one leg sticking out. I was awakened by a cold nose rubbing the side of my bare leg. It was a coyote. I wasn't alarmed. The coyote dashed away and up the steep grade of the entrance. He stood looking down at me. He looked straight into my eyes. He motioned his head as if he were indicating that I should follow. I thought I must be crazy, but he did it again. I trailed behind him to the pack. They all nodded at me. I returned the gesture. They licked, butted and played as they started off into the desert. I followed behind. I was weak from fasting. They waited for me to catch up. We had gone about a half-mile when they caught a whiff of something upwind. The group quietly separated and made a half-circle about 200 yards wide. The one that stayed with me looked me in the eyes. He motioned his head for me to follow. I did. We crept about 300 yards upwind. Then he spit off to the side, zigzagging downwind. He laughed like a crazy person. I heard the others start to howl and laugh from afar. They were approaching like an ever-shrinking half-circle toward the lone coyote. He was making his way toward them. I ran to see what was happening. A jackrabbit was caught in the half-circle. It zigzagged and leaped around, but it was trapped by the encroaching chorus of coyotes. The rabbit stopped, paralyzed. I thought I saw an apparition leave the rabbit. It seemed to no longer have a consciousness. A female coyote took the stiff rabbit and broke its neck. It dangled from her teeth. Another coyote bit into the skin between the rabbit's front legs and ripped open its entire torso. She brought the rabbit to me. She dropped it on my bare feet. The rabbit was hot and bleeding. I felt sick. All 11 of them stood staring at me. I kept getting this thought. It's what you need, take and eat it. They seemed to be sending me that thought. I flashed back to my childhood. I remembered the way my brother Doug sent me his thoughts. This was the same, but this thought had a gentle feeling about it. The coyotes were communicating with me. I looked down at the rabbit. It was warm and moist as if it were alive. I looked at the coyotes and said, I don't know, guys. I haven't eaten meat in 6 years. Then the idea came to me that these coyotes were here to help me quickly end my life. A fast could take months, another oxymoron, I thought. I picked it up. I took a bite. I forced myself to swallow. It came right back up. The coyotes looked at each other as if it were a joke. I sat down for 5 minutes and psyched myself into eating it. After 5 bites, it tasted delicious.